Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Lightspeed. This is the coolest venue I've ever recorded Lightspeed from. We're a Solana podcast. Come out twice a week. Go check us out. I was forced to wear this QR code shirt. Apologies for that. If you want to scan it, I'll take this guy off.
Scanning a QR code is an OPSEC risk, so you might get wrecked if you scan it.
It's actually, going to drain your wallet if you scan it. No, it was not my decision, but I'm sitting here and I have to deal with the decisions I've made in life. So we're going to make the most of it. As mentioned, I'm joined by Kyle and Chris of Multicoin and Drift, respectively, and we're just going to chat a little bit, jam about Solana DeFi. It's a really interesting time in DeFi, I think. There's a lot going on, a lot you could say about it. Some of these interesting prop AMMs coming out, a lot more going on in the lending space. Drift, I think, just announced an institutional product. Hopefully I didn't leak that. That was already announced, yes. So more institutional interest in DeFi. Kyle, I think I'll just kick it off to you to start. When you think back to like a year and a half ago, and it was sort of the Solana DeFi phoenix is rising from the ashes. We're now further into the future. The phoenix is kicking. He loves meme coins. How would you describe this period in time we're living through? Like lay the land for us in the Solana DeFi world right now.
The most interesting thing happening, I think, kind of like across Solana DeFi is just like the market structure is changing and kind of like at all layers of the stack. Obviously, we have Firedance are coming. We have new consensus that was just announced, a day or two ago by Anza. You now see a bunch of new aggregators, DFlow, Titan, obviously Jupe's been around for a while. We continue to see improvements in JIT liquidity, combining on and off chain liquidity. I know we'll talk about Swift here in a minute with the Drift folks. And we just see, what's called Max and Totally just announced application-specific sequencing, otherwise known as ASS. And that's going to have a huge impact on market structure. And so there's like the number of forces like acting on the kind of core system has never really been higher. And it's, Ethereum had some evolving market structure maybe a couple of years ago. And I feel like at this point, actually, Ethereum's market structure is fairly settled. But actually, I think even the degree to which that was dynamic a few years ago, it was actually far less dynamic than what's happening in Solana today. And it's very cool to see so many smart, talented people approach the market structure problems from so many angles.
Yeah, Chris, how does it feel for you? Because I know Drift has been around for years now, and I think there's a lot more competition in the DeFi world than there ever has been. So does what Kyle's saying resonate with you, or like what's it like to be a founder in the Solana DeFi world right now?
Yeah, I think on the Solana front, the biggest advantage right now is very much just trying to push and innovate on making sure execution and trading experience is great on Solana. I think the issue with holding back institutions coming on chain is the fact that institutions don't want to get sandwiched or have crazy slippage, etc. So the fact from like from Totally at the super core understanding like we need to push application specific sequencing to Drift and other DeFi teams pushing for JIT liquidity, RFQ models, etc. Just from like the core to all the app developers consensus on we need to make sure that this is the best possible place to trade is super important, and is like the reason why I'm confident that we'll keep seeing more institutions, more RWAs, et cetera, come on chain. So it's definitely an exciting time.
Let's maybe dive into market making then. You mentioned like the RFQ system that Drift uses, and I think there's a lot more competition in the market making space than there has been, and I guess in the aggregator world as well, which doesn't apply quite as much. But we're seeing a real professionalization, I think, of market making with like Ellipsis Labs has SolFi, which is dominating a lot of Sol USD volume right now. How has that world kind of changed in recent times?
I mean, historically, trading on chain is like an adversarial place to trade. Obviously, started with like MEV on Ethereum, and then as Solana's grown, MEV is a thing that can stop people from wanting to trade on chain. So a lot of it is just like people are working backwards from how do we provide good liquidity on chain. So something like SolFi, where they're pushing Oracle updates like really tightly and super optimized for making sure they can update their quotes on chain. And then on the Drift side, we've always been pretty cognizant of making sure that there's a good microstructure for market makers. So the way Drift works is every order ends up going through an auction, and market makers compete to fill them as fast as they can at good prices. So we just launched Swift to make that even easier, more reliable. Soon we have our new DLP passive liquidity improvement mechanism, et cetera, coming out. So we're just super focused on making sure users can get the best prices. And I think if we keep doing that, more and more institutions will want to come be on chain, and obviously have the regulatory backdrop to make it happen too.
What's adoption for Swift looked like? Because we spoke, I guess, right around the time you were launching it. You released the white paper, but how's kind of the expectation compared to the reality as you've rolled that out?
Yeah, so far it's been really good. All of our market makers are integrated on it. I think the feedback from users is that they love that it's faster, gasless trading, et cetera. So far it's actually been really well received. There's still more work to do. I think Drift's focused on a combination of like active and passive liquidity. So we just made a big upgrade to active liquidity. We're going to do another one to passive with the new DLP token over the next month or two. And then, the great thing is like while we're innovating at the app layer, Solana's still like pushing improvements. So things like Alpenglow are going to make the user experience even faster. You know, as blocks get bigger and block times get shorter, like Drift automatically kind of inherits that, and the experience gets better. So, there's a lot of good things coming up.
Do either of y'all have immediate thoughts on Alpenglow? It's not something I've dug into too much yet, but seems like, day one of the conference that was announced, and I think it's a huge deal that maybe even isn't being talked about enough as far as like how big of an upgrade that is to Solana.
Yeah, look, I'm no consensus theoretician, so no like nuanced views about consensus algorithms. But to me, one thing stands out, which is the Solana kind of core engineers decided to kind of violate a core rule of consensus algorithms, or I should say BFT consensus algorithms. Everyone, all the other ecosystems I'm aware of, when they, if you do BFT in any proof of stake context, the key threshold is 2/3 to finalize, and the Solana guys kind of revisited that assumption from first principles and said, well, 1/3 of the network being Byzantine is like a pretty insane scenario. What if we relax that assumption a little? Like can we get additional performance gains? And so they relaxed that assumption to 20% Byzantine and 20% just like faulty or offline, but not actively malicious. And when you relax that assumption a little bit, they can get to even faster. I don't appreciate the nuance of why that leads to lower latency confirmations, but it does. And that strikes me as like an incredibly pragmatic decision to make, and to not be caught up in academia of like, it has to be perfectly Byzantine fault tolerant. So that's the kind of decision that I love to see.
Speaking of academic considerations, what do you make of some of the critiques maybe from like the Ethereum world that, these core engineers at Anza are changing like at a real base level how Solana works, and there's like, this is essentially a centralization vector or something like that?
I mean, great. Like they did the merge. They were going to do EOF, then they're not going to do EOF, and now they're going to scale the I mean, dude, it's the same shit. Like, look in the mirror, man.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to Alpenglow. Cool thing about it, I think, just from a user perspective, should lead to feeling like your transactions are going through faster. Like for app developers, there's sometimes issues with like, which fork is your transaction on, what's actually happening. So that'll be big. And I think the longer term second order consequences of getting rid of vote transactions should make running a validator cheaper, and potentially paves the way to like reconsider the inflation curve for Solana, which I think is also pretty interesting when we think about Solana becoming like more institutional grade asset with like less crazy inflation. So overall, I think it's pretty positive outcome.
Yeah, Chris, I don't think we ever spoke about 228, but Drift runs a validator. Did you guys vote? And like, what is your take on, should there be some kind of quote unquote left curve 228 where it's not a market-based mechanism like I think Galaxy Research proposed recently?
Yeah, so 228 was a proposal to reduce Solana inflation. Solana validator, or Drift validator, voted yes for that. I think a lot of the inflation is to kind of cover this really long tail of validators that, like, without it, potentially wouldn't be able to run their business, but didn't really feel like they were meaningfully contributing to the decentralization of the network. I also think the inflation is kind of it is a tax on people that for whatever reason can't hold or can't stake. So definitely was in favor of reducing that, just in making it a mature asset. And I think you think about Sol as like this core asset in Solana DeFi. You definitely just want to make it like more reliable, more predictable. So in terms of left curve 228, as a dev, it's like if you can make like a one-line code change to do something and move you in the right direction, I think that's a smart move. So I was in favor of it, but obviously you also want to push to some more ideal long-term outcome. So
Kyle, where do you stand on all that today?
Continue to want to see 228 or something like it ultimately get implemented. For the primary reason you said, it's kind of a tax. And the specific tax that I'm most frustrated with is just like a large number of service providers in the ecosystem, a lot of the validators, the service businesses, custodians, et cetera. They're just market selling all of their commissions kind of in real time. And that I'm just like, I don't want Coinbase to make money from selling, Sol at a 10% commission. Like that's very frustrating to me. So I think we'll get there. To me, actually, the more important part of Multicoin proposed 228, and although I was not the lead person on it at the firm, 228 was intended to be a step one to a larger vision, which is ultimately to get to what we internally talk about as long-term staking. My partners Tushar and Vishal have written a blog post about long-term staking, I think a year or two ago on the Multicoin blog. But ultimately, what we really want to see is we want to see a native yield curve in Solana. It strikes me as very dumb that people who, like, I've been holding my Sol tokens for 7 years now, network launched in 2020, so 5 years, and I don't intend to sell them anytime soon. And I would like to be able to earn more economics for committing to not selling for a longer period of time than a guy who's going to plan to sell in a day or two. And so there's a lot of ways you can design a yield curve system, and there is no one objectively right answer. I know internally we've played with a whole bunch of models on how to do that. But I think, as Chris was saying, is like we've got to institutionalize this asset, and as the asset of Sol matures, having a native yield curve is going to be an incredible thing, specifically for large pools of institutional capital around the world. Obviously, we have treasury markets today. The way you would handle a yield curve here would be different, but I think ultimately makes this a more enticing asset to capital market participants around the world.
What's the consideration of long-term staking for like DeFi? Because I know that one of the arguments that Multicoin put forward for why 228 or something like it should happen is that if too much Sol is staked, it discourages DeFi because this Sol is just locked up and may not be actually useful. So if you institute something like long-term staking where people are incentivized to stake and never unstake, does that also depress DeFi activity?
I mean, it complicates DeFi in that, like, depending on how you do maturities, and there's a whole bunch of mechanical details there. So it creates complexity to like deal with collateral of like, well, this Sol unlocks in 2 days, this Sol unlocks in 2 weeks, this Sol unlocks in 3 months. So that DeFi protocols will need to deal with that. It also creates opportunity, which is you're now going to create liquid markets for all of those LST pairs between Sol. And I think certainly as a long-term Sol believer, I actually am very intrigued by the idea of someone, is earning whatever 5% yield on their long-term stake Sol. They need to sell it for whatever reason. If I can buy that and earn a 6% rate, so again, as a greedy long-term Sol holder, I like this kind of a thing. It's a way to make free money for having. Oh, sorry, it's a way to maximally profit on having long duration. And I'm a big fan of that, and a big fan of market makers and market pricing.
And just riffing on that, I think things like Exponent, where they're trying to break out the principal and the yield on staking, you could imagine that being like 10x more important if you did have this idea of like a yield curve on Sol.
Interesting. What do you guys make of Axiom? I think this is like a kind of out of left field question, but one of the more interesting breakout apps of the past, 5 months of 2025, I guess, has been Axiom, which it's like a Solana trading platform, I guess. My very kind of simple understanding of it is you combine Solana meme coins and hyperliquid perps, which are two very popular crypto products right now. And it's now, by Rev, maybe past Pump Fund. It's close to Pump Fund. I don't know if that's, someone can fact check me there. But looking at that success, I mean, it is yet to be proven out over a longer period of time. Maybe it's points farming, maybe it's something like this. But why did Axiom work in your guys' opinion?
I'm not in the trenches, so I can't speak to the nuanced product decisions that the Axiom team made, other than very clearly they made a ton of very good nuanced product decisions that meme coin traders want. That was their first product. And then obviously those people said, I want hyperliquid perps too, and so they added that a little later. At the end of the day, they really understand their customers and how people do discovery and trading of meme coins. And as of now, it appears they understand that better than anyone else in the world. Obviously, Pump and Photon and all these guys are all very, very quickly iterating. But really understanding how those people think is the key to what Axiom's done.
And well, Chris, do you have thoughts on that? And then I'll follow up. I guess, you are also obviously building a perps exchange, and it's a difficult space, or maybe a more competitive one than it had been 2 years ago. So what are you seeing from customers, and what are users saying that they want of the perps product right now, and how are you trying to create features to make the Drift platform more interesting to users?
Yeah, that's a good question. The amazing thing about DeFi is it's very much permissionless to come and build on top of it. So Drift's had over, I think we have a slide later, 60 different apps have been built on Drift over this year. So it's almost like a bunch of different companies come in and build, use different parts of Drift's cross-collateral risk engine to build different, experiences. So there are some perp UIs that are integrated with Drift, like Ranger. There's also borrow lend aggregators. There's people using Drift as like a back end for their DeFi checking account, credit cards, etc. So there's a lot of different ways you can leverage perp decks, especially one that's vertically integrated with the borrow lend to build out different products. So definitely one of the best things about building Drift is how many people can build on top of it. And basically, what we focus on a ton on the Drift developer side is just continuing to scale up liquidity. So the number of teams that can build on top of Drift continues to grow. That's both on the perp side with Swift, but then also on the borrow lend side. We wrote this thing called isolated borrow lend pools, which is actually what's powering the Drift institutional and the new ACRED rollout. So it's kind of just constantly ratcheting up this system and making it better so it can serve more users.
I want to jump on that last point. As an entrepreneur, launching this kind of private credit product as a perps exchange, is that a way to competitively separate yourself? And is there something where I'm riffing here, but maybe Axiom is very degen and they just are going for the degen audience. But if Drift can drive revenue from perps, but also have this institutional side, does that separate you in the perps field? What's the competitive advantage maybe presented by having an institutional product, to say that more straightforwardly?
I would say coming at it from the dev perspective, Drift as a platform can serve many different types of assets, and it's been like battle tested. It's this first engine that works really well. So it's a very easy horizontal move to support institutions that are basically enabling a sort of carry trade where they're tapping into DeFi liquidity. And so when these institutions come on chain, they're just looking for a place like legitimate DeFi where they can, deploy. It's just very natural for Drift, and because the Drift platform's already built out, it's like very marginal cost for us to support. I wouldn't say it was like, oh, we're going to spend a year working on Drift Institutional. If anything, it just kind of like, minimal amount of work to make it happen. And so when you build a platform, these kind of use cases just pop up. It's not like you have to do a lot of like crazy demand estimations or something. So it came out pretty organically just from the change in regulatory landscape, and now they can come on chain, and we have a battle-tested risk engine, and it's just easy to get it going.
To zoom out, Kyle, do you think private credit is like the next frontier of tokenization or whatever? I think Yano at Blockworks has tweeted at some point, like, first it was bringing dollars, then it was treasuries on chain, and now it's going to be private credit, which is this more recent, very attractive kind of investment thing. So I don't know. We had Drift launch with Apollo. I think Camino had some announcement yesterday as well. Is that a real thing? Like, is that going to become the next kind of tokenization hotbed?
I generally think so. The easiest tokenized product to sell is like higher yield on dollars. That's kind of like the most universally wanted product. And private credit can offer higher yields than bank deposits or money market funds. And most people don't understand risk. So it's like, oh, the treasuries are 4.5% and Apollo is 9 or 12 or whatever the ACRED fund is. Sounds great. give me some of that. And so the higher nominal APY that is rooted in reality, it's not just like some liquidity farming nonsense, will attract a lot of capital.
I mean, you can just think of like Circle and Tether is basically like the same exact type of product, except they offer 0% yield because people don't realize that there's yield being earned on the back end. So it's like all these institutions are seeing the money that Circle and Tether are making, and they're like, well, why can't we tap into this? So it's kind of just like everyone wants to tap into like the most profitable carry trade of all time.
Yeah, which is
all the people that are holding Circle are just like funding basically this carry trade, and then now institutions are coming in and they're giving that yield back to the users.
Interesting. Maybe relatedly, like, do either of you have a thesis for how stablecoins evolve? Tenuously playing with the DeFi like theme here, but I'm just curious. Like, as you mentioned, Circle enormously profitable. A lot of that profit goes to Coinbase. Even, and a lot of that yield isn't passed back to users. There's some regulatory questions, but I think there's a real sense of like everyone's bullish on stablecoins, doesn't know how to get exposure to stablecoins, and there's a lot of like benefit maybe to regulatory capture in the U.S. especially. So how do we see that all resolving over the coming months?
Well, I don't think anything will be resolved in the next few months, but I mean, look, if you want to go long stablecoins, like the right way to think about that is to go. Well, hey, Drift should add dated futures for stablecoin outstanding market cap. I've suggested that feature before. I don't know when they're going to ship it, Chris. But separately from dated futures, the like right way to think about going long stablecoins is borrow like systems that manage leverage on chain. Because at the end of the day, whether it's a perp or whether it's a spot borrow lend, you need dollars, right? And so if you want to go long stablecoins and you want to go long systems that manage leverage, and Drift is obviously one of the largest systems today that manages leverage on chain. So stuff like that is the way to go long stablecoins.
Is there any like weird DeFi stuff you're into? Like I think you get a lot of the same answers when you look at Solana DeFi, like a lot of the same incumbents have been pretty popular and around, but like, is there any stuff further out on the risk curve or just like weird, more real world applications for DeFi that you're excited about or hope to see growth in or something like this?
I mean, the other obvious one is on-chain equities. And a lot of people are working on that now. I think the Solana folks are announcing a ton of stuff at Accelerate this week to that effect. And I think you'll see on-chain equities pretty soon. I hope that they can become collateral in systems like Drift. I'm sure the Drift guys are going to make that happen. And then, like from there, getting to like Tesla perps or Google perps or whatever, I think that we're a little further out on that stuff, but I do think it's coming. The other really interesting area I think about kind of next frontier for DeFi is prediction markets. Most folks in crypto are familiar with Polymarket. Polymarket really isn't DeFi in any meaningful sense of the word. You just deposit USDC and then it all runs off chain. The other kind of big group in town is Kalshi, which has less awareness in crypto circles, but is actually a much bigger prediction market platform today. I'm actually interviewing the founder of Kalshi on Friday at Accelerate. And I can tell you his name's Tarek, and he's super, super excited about bringing prediction markets on-chain and tapping into global crypto liquidity to make that happen.
Is that true? Does Kalshi have more volume than Polymarket?
Way more.
Interesting. I did not know that. And there's some crypto thing coming. If they're speaking at Accelerate, you would think.
That is a reasonable
putting
assumption.
Two and two together.
that is a reasonable assumption.
Chris, what about you? I mean,
I won't repeat anything. I mean, I'll bring up Exponent again because we just launched an isolated pool for them. I think it's interesting that you're seeing basically teams trying to like standardize how the yield works for Solana LSTs and kind of be able to pick them apart and people to speculate on different portions of the yield and the principal. That's pretty cool. And then I also I like this trend of more and more Bitcoin making its way onto Solana. I know Kyle hates Bitcoin, but there's a lot of people out there that like it. And obviously Bitcoin hasn't really been able to deliver in DeFi probably the way like people would have hoped. So I think Solana as the execution layer for Bitcoin makes a lot of sense. So it's exciting to see more and more Bitcoin making it on chain there.
yeah, Kyle, I saw you tweeted the other day that like quantum is going to wreck Bitcoin. You want to say more? I'm curious what the reasoning is.
I've spoken to a couple of startups recently that are trying to tackle the problem of quantum computers breaking Bitcoin. Well, when I say breaking, I want to be very specific what that means. Stealing large numbers of very old coins. And it is generally understood among quantum people that will be possible. If you go on ChatGPT or Grok, deep research, and extrapolate from Google and Microsoft's kind of announcements over the last few months and dig into their papers, it would imply that we will have quantum computers that can steal Bitcoin around the year 2030, plus or minus. A lot of assumptions in that. Could be faster, it could be slower, but that's kind of my base case as of now based on ChatGPT and Grok. And so then if you start to reverse engineer from there, well, what does that mean? And it's pretty bad. Like, can they soft fork in post-quantum signatures? Yes. Does that solve the problem? Not really, because that still means every single UTXO needs to get migrated over from old ECDSA system to new one. But then also the new signatures are 20 times as large as the old signatures. So like block space, just like Bitcoin's throughput would fall by 20x. Like, and it's just like a lot of things I think are going to start to get really funky in this world. And then obviously there's also the threat of like, well, okay, you migrate your coins over, but then 20% of the Bitcoin, it's only older addresses that are really subject to this, can be stolen, including like all of Satoshi's coins. And it's like, are we all gonna like? Is Bitcoin actually gonna be a trusted thing if it's like known that like someone somewhere just like stole 20% of the Bitcoin? Like that also strikes me as like fundamentally not long-term, like okay for the Bitcoin story. So I think the whole thing is just totally fucked. And very, very hard to reason about. I am trying to talk to more people to like reason about the game theory of like how does this actually play out. But the more you look into it, the more you realize it's an absolute disaster.
Okay, so if a large amount of the Bitcoin supply can be stolen, like, don't we have bigger problems too? Like, there's lots of things that could be broken by quantum, I guess, in a similar way, right?
Sure, yeah, but like, it's particularly problematic for Bitcoin because the defining feature of Bitcoin is that like it doesn't change, and like Ethereum nor Solana made that promise to the world. So they were like, "No, guys, it's not perfect. We got a long ways to go." And all the Bitcoin people are like, "No, it's perfect. 21 million, we're good. Digital gold," and so like, yeah, that's a really big problem. I'm not really worried about Solana because like the Solana guys are already working on getting the quantum signatures in the system. They'll probably go live in like a year or something. No one is even gonna like know or care. And then you'll be able to just migrate your coins over whenever you want. And Solana has enough throughput that like everyone will be able to migrate their stuff over. Actually, this is a funny thing for Bitcoin. If you took 100% of the block space of Bitcoin today, just migrating UTXOs from ECDSA to the post-quantum signatures, that would take 3 to 6 months of 100% of Bitcoin block utilization. So it's just like, even if people start wanting to migrate over, you also realize like, oh wow, that's totally fucked. And like that problem won't exist for Solana.
Yeah, I have to go execute some trades after this pod. I guess one other thing I want to get into, getting back to our main subject of today, is just you referred to app-specific sequencing, Kyle, by a crass name earlier. But I just want to like talk about the relationship that Solana should have with its apps. I think that something you could think about is like a world in which apps become start to take REV away from Solana maybe, or search for ways to capture more value relative to the Solana L1. Not in the same way, but in a same like business consideration direction as L2 is taking value away from Ethereum. So how do you kind of grow the pie for Solana DeFi and allow sustainable businesses to grow without these apps basically becoming parasitic to Solana?
Yeah, I was talking with Max and Matt Sorg about this yesterday. The vision of Solana was on-chain NASDAQ, and there's been a handful of attempts at on-chain limit order books, Serum, and then more recently Phoenix. Drift has one as well, and I think Loopscale recently launched one for borrow lend. And like Phoenix today effectively is dead. The Ellipsis team more or less killed it and like has their SolFi thing running now. As a practical statement, on-chain limit order books are not good enough yet to like rival CeFi. They're not going to ever. Maybe we'll get to like fully better than CeFi one day, but like they're not close enough yet to compete with CeFi as of now. And so as a result, we have mostly AMMs and off-chain stuff as the substitute we have effectively. And Drift has both of those live today. I want on-chain limit orders to exist, and the only way to get there is with prioritized cancels. And so the guys kind of designing application-specific sequencing have that in mind as the primary use case, and are going to try and make that happen. I believe I think that's just actually net accretive, because today on-chain limit order books don't exist because market makers stopped quoting. So if you add the application-specific sequencing, that will make it possible to have cancels at the top of the block, which will allow market makers to quote. So I just think it's like strictly accretive to Solana, and to the applications as well. So I'm like just a fan all around.
Yeah, Chris, I'll let you.
Yeah, I think basically summarize why we need it to make market makers better. I think more just high-level view. I think I heard Tolly talking about it, and his view is like, if we don't add this thing, apps will eventually leave because they'll want to build order books. And that makes me very bullish, because fundamentally a blockchain is about getting app developers to build useful things. And I think just the framing of like, what do we not have in the protocol that's stopping people from building valuable applications, and then let's add that, is super important, especially versus maybe like older legacy players who kind of like just gave up on that. So I'm very bold up on app specific sequencing because it's just like an acknowledgement of what the problem is and where we need to go to keep making things better. So I think it's a good step in the right direction.
So to make this more concrete, let's say as like a hypothetical, Pump Fund says, hey, we've been driving so much value to Solana, so much rev is captured by Solana validators because of the business that we do. And so forget this, we're launching Pump L2 and it settles as like an optimistic roll-up type thing to Solana. Do these kinds of fixes solve for that problem where basically an app gets so big that it just says, we don't need Solana anymore, we can do our own distribution, we're gonna settle as little data to the chain or do as little on chain as possible because then we can like capture value to our own business instead?
I mean, yes, it's certainly adding stuff like application-specific sequencing will mitigate people's desire to do that. No questions asked. And obviously, like the goal with Solana has always been a single global state machine, and so you got to serve the developers though if you want to get there.
Yeah, my philosophy on DeFi is that users and app builders / asset issuers want to meet on the place that maximizes this trade-off between decentralization and performance. You bring up Pump Fund. If they're on their own L2, do I really want to issue my tokens on Pump Fund's L2? Probably not. You want it to be a global platform that no one can turn off. It has all those properties of a global platform. So it's like I think Solana's threading that needle between decentralization and performance that you need to like be the Schelling point for users, app builders, and asset issuers.
Okay, so then maybe the place I'll end here is there's a lot of pressure to make those kinds of trade-offs and not do the DeFi things and realize some of the kind of ideals of decentralization and DeFi. So just as a closing statement, I guess I'll start with you, Chris, and then go to Kyle, is just why does DeFi matter? Like why should we care about DeFi in the year of our Lord 2025?
Yeah, I came into DeFi late 2021 and just was able to read open source code and start contributing. And I think that's ultimately why I want to be part of DeFi. I want it to be an open and permissionless global system that anyone can participate in. So it's important to keep pushing on that efficient frontier between performance and decentralization. So it continues to be like that. That's why I would rather keep building on Solana, building DeFi than just build some centralized L2 that maybe is a little faster in the short run, but isn't as inspiring to me.
Yeah, I mean, we call it DeFi, but I actually think it kind of misses the key thing, which is permissionless access, and that's what matters. And these systems, you can set up your own validator, you can just generate entropy on your device and have a private key and a public key. And then you can access global markets 24/7. These systems are truly permissionless, and that's obviously what financial markets should be instead of all the regulated shit we have today. So that's my vision, is to take finance to its logical endpoint, and that's only going to happen on permissionless rails.
Yeah, great place to end it. This has been Lightspeed Live from Drift DeFi Day. Kyle, Chris, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Jack.
Thank you.